Welcome to another episode of Real Life Fiction. I am Matt James with Conundrum Publishing, international best-selling author of the Jack Riley Adventures series. And today I'll be talking to author TIM HEATH. Hey Tim, great to have you on the show. How you doing, my friend?
Thank you. Yes, wonderful. Thank you for being here across time zones. I just figured what's wonderful, like looking at the map just above your head. Now, obviously, you got the UK, which is where I'm from, but actually from Estonia. So it's kind of a little bit further east, yeah, right at the top of the map.
This is really hard considering it's backwards. I'm going,
Yeah, so it's awesome. It's great to be here. So it's evening for me, but we live in a connected world. So this is what's wonderful.
Absolutely. It's so funny you bring that up because literally the interview I did a few days ago, I talked with a friend, RF Blackstone, Rich, and he lives outside of Sydney in Australia.
Wow.
And it was 8 a.m. my time and 10 p.m. his time. And we talked until like after midnight between recording and then not recording and stuff. And I'm just like, so I'm like, if it seems a little funky, that's because I just woke up and he's now going to bed. So it's not quite to the extreme right now. So I can still see the sun, out where you are. I think it's like 4-ish out there. I think the time is right now.
It's five here, nearly five.
Oh, okay. All right.
When we hit the hour, it'll be 5. I don't have a clock. I never wear a watch, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So, if the viewer does not know who Tim Heath is, what information can you give us to kind of clue you in onto who you are?
Yeah, well, I'm certain the viewer probably doesn't yet know who I am. I'm not that full of myself.
You never know.
I'm Tim. I have a wonderful family. We originally from England, moved away a long time ago, 2008, moved to Russia. And then in 2012, moved to Estonia, so back into Europe.
Yeah.
And so been here over 10 years. And through that journey, so I think the transition from like full-time office job where I kind of wrote on the side to sort of just shuffling up life, reshuffling, resetting and stuff, resetting rules and stuff, became a writer and became first published once we moved to Estonia. So really that's kind of taken more precedent now, more time, and able to go full-time with that a few years ago as the books increased and stuff. But I into movies, into great stories. I think for me the driving factor with I think really that first book I was writing, which I was writing around, I think our first child was being born at that point, did a full-time office job, thinking about moving to Russia, and it was just kind of this movie playing out in my head, this idea, this premise, and I was just from that point felt like, okay, this is something I want to write. I want to watch this one day. I want to see it, and really it's kind of how it started and mostly how it continues. I've tweaked and refined and improved the way I do things, but mostly it's that kind of process of I want to write things that I really want to see, and there was these stories going on that I kind of know. If I can get it right, if I can get it as half as good as I'm seeing it in my head, others might enjoy it too. So that's really, my starting point.
Oh yeah, especially. So you bring that up. I know. So your series that I'm currently looking at, The Hunt, St. Petersburg, Russia. So I'm assuming there was some influence from your time living abroad that influenced that series.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. My third book I'd penned, which is a book called Lips, so standalone. So like my first 4, I started with just a standalone book.
Mm-hmm.
Standalone book. That's I love standalone. It doesn't seem to have ever affected his career. He's a fantastic writer.
Sure.
And so I'd written this book called The Tablet. Based in St. Petersburg, telling, kind of showing the reader that kind of part of the world, but wrapped around like a spy thriller kind of genre book, which is kind of mostly my mainstay. I have deviated quite a little bit since. And my first book actually touched potentially on sci-fi, but I was very clear to not call it sci-fi because I didn't want it to be labeled as science fiction.
Yeah,
but
I've had to do that. Yeah, I get it.
yeah, so the tablet was like kind of a bit of a surprise. It was like up to that point, you know, I think my first book took me 7 years to write. So up to that point, I got the first draft for the tablet down in 7 days and 4 hours. So
Okay.
which is like, you know, by way the quickest. I mean, I've kind of equaled that a couple of times, but just there was something about it, and I mean, I'm not. It wasn't like a runaway success because I didn't really know how to market. But in terms of the people that were reading it, were really enjoying it. So I kind of out of that, which is really what led to the Hunt series, was kind of there are some crossover characters, but it's a new series. But basically, I knew there was more to tell and more to kind of show that part of the world because
Sure.
not every, especially nowadays,
Oh
not
yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
can travel to these places.
Yeah. No, I mean that area is beautiful. I mean that's it's sad because so like the book I'm currently writing features a fairly prominent in this book Russian character, and wholly on accident, just because the book takes place over in like Nepal and Tibet, and I'm like, well, where can I bring in some characters from that part of the world that aren't typically like just your Chinese, you know, that area. So I'm like, well, I'll bring in a former Russian, you know, intelligence officer and you know, now mercenary, and not particularly on purpose because of anything happening globally right now, but the characters are still just so interesting. And there's who was it? It was of course now I'm blanking because we're talking about so many things. Another author did Ernest Dempsey is writing his next Jack Harper book, and it's called Moscow Sky, I believe. And he actually had questions from readers about setting a book and having it pertain to the Russian community. And he's just like, in this book, the conflict doesn't exist. And I'm like, he put it very simply, and that's like in my books, like COVID doesn't exist in my Jack Riley series because you don't have to include that current of an event, especially one that would kind of ruin the travel aspect of a lot of what's going on. So it was actually kind of cool to kind of see like, well, he goes, it doesn't exist, so I don't care. Like in the series, it doesn't exist, and I'm like, that's actually a really great way of putting it. So same idea. I mean, I have no issue with somebody setting a book in Russia. I don't care. I think it's great because I just, again, it's a beautiful area, and I would love to know more about it, you know, in the communities.
Yeah, I mean, and there's, I mean, historically, whether like, you know, I don't know, going back generations, it was different countries or different threats, or even, you know, it was the Soviet Union in the day, the Cold War in it. There's always this, you know, this angle to write into. You need a sort of villain and a you know, some sort of kind of that, you know, you need a threat to be real. Obviously, so you know, the whole series it's being republished with Conundrum this year, which is fantastic. But did release 5 years ago, so obviously predates this latest invasion, and so I know, you know, I'm not doing it deliberately on the back of that. This was an existing series, and what I did for this existing series is just, you know, took, you know, like dates. I took the current president out, so like made my own president, you know. So originally it had been written with looking at, you know, what would it take to get Putin from power. That's kind of an underlying theme in the book of taking what I know of Russian culture and I'm not a bit like, you know, looking back to the Second World War and saying, you know, it would be wrong to say all Germans equals Nazis. No, the Nazi Party was at war, and you know, and I'm this war is a Kremlin war in Ukraine, but the Russian people as large are just hostages to it. So it's not like all countries on board. So I'm not like, and you know, I hear this rhetoric a little bit, you know, all Russia equals all bad, you know, and it's like, well, that's kind of a bit like naive to say that.
It absolutely is.
Political Russia, political Kremlin Russia is behind all this. So, and so obviously the book does touch on that. and it's knowing the region, knowing the people, knowing the language. I wanted to put together this kind of well, what would it take, knowing how strong a leader is, and I guess the same rule would be on different states around the world that are like kind of dictators, kind of off the cuff you would know, okay, well they've got to be obviously stronger, more powerful, more so this whole series came to get together just to kind of tell that through a clever little story that grows each book. What I love from the readers who've gone through it, it's one of those rare series, I say humbly, because I've read some great opening books, and then you kind of go in a few, and it's like, they don't quite live up to it. And actually, it is a series that grows and gets stronger. So it starts well, but each book improves, which for me was always the goal. And it is great to kind of get to those key points where, not to give spoilers, but maybe there is a change, and so therefore, if someone was good enough or powerful enough or wicked enough to become president, well, would we then want them? It's these kind of like philosophical questions that I love raising in the series. And got very exciting because the old phrase, better the devil it's this kind of thing, if somebody, and again, we could pick another dictatorship, if someone was strong enough to overpower North Korea, then should we be more fearful of the person who could do that? Because it's these systems that have that are based on control. Is if a new controller comes into power,
well, that was always the fear with like Afghanistan, and that was the fear with Iraq, and that was the fear with Cuba. It's like, okay, so you knock off their main guys, well, their biggest zealot followers are just going to take over. Like, what are you actually dropping into power? It's like, we knew Fidel Castro. Like, we know Putin. We know them. We know what they're doing. We know who they are. If you knock them out, what are you introducing? Are you introducing the exact same thing? Or are you introducing something potentially even more dangerous? So it's a possibility. Or are you introducing something better? So I mean,
but also in my series, it's an internal displacement. So again, which is so done in a very Russian way. So it's interesting anyway. But that was
very KGB, James Bond kind of.
I've got British MI5 in there. So again, there's some crossover characters who were in the tablet. They come into this series a little bit later as really to help. But it's like a wide cast of, at times, well, who we rooting for, and obviously as the various, and the key Russians involved are oligarchs, so multi-billionaire, hugely influential. Again, it's a phrase largely when the series first ran, it first published that not your average person would know what an oligarch is. I think with recent events, particularly in Europe, with a lot of the sanctions on famous Russian oligarchs in the UK, the awareness of who that is. So it's a very limited term. So a Russian who becomes wealthy now is just a millionaire. So it's those people that came through the fall of the Soviet Union who got control of key industries, most exclusively men, basically, who were very rich and very powerful as a result of that, coming into modern Russia. So that's kind of this. It's a very niche phrase. For me, my understanding of an oligarch now, you cannot become an oligarch now.
Yeah,
it was a time limited phrase, like, so you're just a billionaire now.
Gotcha. So it's specific to more of the time frame, specific
time frame.
I didn't know that. I mean, I haven't researched that, so that's interesting to find out.
So cool. It's very specific for that, and so it's very interesting to obviously write. I was very careful not to base it on any individual, so I looked through all the lists and sort of made up my own collage of, based on random names that sound good for the English reader, and kind of what industries they're in. They obviously they all touch the same industries because they're billionaires, and so created my own unique list, not based on any actual people who are alive, because I don't want to go that route. You don't want to.
Oh no, yeah, I was. very close to accidentally doing that in The Forgotten Fortune, because it's all based on the Third Reich and the eventual maybe rise of the Fourth Reich type. It's like, so I had to be very careful with names because there are family members, because it's based on you know historical fact that, of course, we fictionalize to make it interesting. But
Yeah.
I had to be very careful with names that I use, because there are family members of these awful Nazi leaders that are still alive
Right.
and do not at all believe in what their great grandfather would have done.
Okay.
So you have to be very, very careful. Like, it revolves a lot around Himmler, and it revolves a lot around, Hitler himself. And it's like there are descendants of these guys alive right now that don't want
Mhm.
anything to do with him. So the worst thing you can do is include them in a story that taints them, and
Yeah.
then possibly get sued. So yeah, we don't need to do that. Let's stay
I
away
mean,
from that. Just fictionalize a character.
Russia doesn't particularly sue. They
No.
act a bit more swiftly than that. But,
Yeah, no.
yeah, I live in a neighbouring country, so no. I think but for me, I think the whole thing of like I'm not anti-Russians per se. I think
No.
we've got a lot of friends that we missed, and obviously really struggling in St. Petersburg because of this. They're affected as much as lots of people. The
Oh,
people,
sure.
their economy is crashing. They can't draw money out. They can't have job. Like so. No, but yeah, obviously the political side and Kremlin side is even for me. I've been shocked by because they're not. Putin's not acting like a Russian would, because Ukraine is a brother,
Yeah.
and so and family is very important in Russia.
Yeah,
Really
and
important.
that's what is so great about you. See, to me, if you didn't set this story in Russia, to me, that would be almost like a disservice, because it's like, okay, we know there's like, so what is the similarity? Could you have dropped this story in Venezuela? Could you have dropped it in North Korea? Could you have dropped it somewhere else? Maybe, but your innate knowledge of the actual community is a great resource. And it's like, if you didn't write the story, dropping your character in St. Petersburg, then I would almost be like, man, he missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, a lot of my characters come from South Florida. That's where I've been my whole life. So
Mhm.
I have a lot of characters who were born and raised in South Florida. They went to the same high school together,
Yeah.
just because that was the high school I went to.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't know each other, but I just and they might be of different graduating classes, but at least there's like some commonality, just because that's something I wanted to throw in there from my
Mm.
personal life.
Writing what you know is important, isn't
Yeah.
it? You
Yeah,
don't have
but
to make everything
but
up.
it's also fun to include you. It's fun to
Yeah.
include
Yeah.
your something about you in the story, in the character's personality. In this case, in an area that you know quite a good deal about because you lived there. So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm happy that it was set there, because like knowing this about you now, knowing that you lived over there for, what'd you say, 10 years?
So lived in St. Petersburg for 4, and we've lived in Estonia for 10. Yeah.
Okay.
So 14.
So, but in the general area, it's like, I would be like, man, he could have used that to his advantage in this, because he just knows so much more about the little like B details that I can't look
Yeah.
up on Google,
Yeah.
you know.
No, so I think, yeah, so I've tried my best to do that, and I think that comes through, and just trying to get that balance. And obviously, some of my Russian oligarchs are real villains, and and it's it comes out cleverly, and how they just the sphere of influence, and the how far that connections go. And as the series went through, again, it came out 5 years ago.
Yeah.
In a series in one of the later books, that I think maybe it's the next one, that Conundrum Publishing, or the one after that. But actually, Russia turns off gas to Europe, which has now happened this month. So it's like, I wrote it, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And as a, it was, it was weaponized, so it was done on purpose to cause a chain reaction, chain events
Sure.
that gets Europe more reliant on nuclear power, and there's a threat through that. But it was like, a lot of people, so a lot of the readers who are even reading it now are rereading the series, like they can't believe how kind of spot on it was. And some things I was able to like think at the time. I was able to work in, there was some poison in Salisbury, UK, 4 or 5 years ago, for like a former spy.
Gotcha.
And I was able to work that into the series, and with a little bit of a twist on, and just it just felt, it just fell in line. And so
Oh yeah.
it was so, a little bit of real world stuff linked in, but it's, I think the thing about books, like any genre, they're their own little worlds, aren't they? So it's not
Yeah.
unless it's a non-fiction, a statement, a political statement, or you're just presenting a different world. And
Oh yeah.
so COVID doesn't, like you say, I think it came up earlier, COVID doesn't exist in my book series because, well, that would shut the world down. And like we've all lived through COVID, so who wants to read about it?
Well,
latest James Bond, and it doesn't move from London for 3 months. It's like, seriously, who wants to watch that?
James has to quarantine when he gets back for 2 weeks, right?
Exactly.
In a hotel.
Exactly.
So it's like, where does that go? So I mean, I get it. See, I know writers who have included it into stories just for the realism fact, because it is something that exists. And I'm not saying they're like taking advantage, but it's a current event. So of the current events, this is probably the biggest global current event we've had in decades. So
in modern history.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I completely understand, Rick, who I was talking about, Rick Chesler, wrote a book called Deep Green, and it's about like a modern day medicine man going into the jungles looking for a cure for the continuing mutations of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's great because it spurred some creativity and it spurred a story that people can relate to. Or the other side of the coin, don't mention it because people have heard it enough. So it's like suspend reality for the person. That's what we're supposed to do, right? The disbelief. So it's like, that's me. That's my side of it. I'm sick to death of it. So I don't want to ever mention it because I'm not the only person that doesn't want to hear about it anymore. They just somebody that just wants to, enjoy the fictional worlds that we create instead of, there's certain things, I guess there's just certain lines that I won't cross when it comes to like in this case, the global pandemic. I just don't mention it because I know for a fact there's a ton of people that just don't want to have to read about it too.
Yeah. And I think there's a third reason as well. This is something that occurred to me as I've been going through the Hunt series, all 9 books ready for Conundrum, and the magic they're going to put to the covers and all the insides and stuff was. So I deliberately this time, obviously, I changed the president, for Russia because, for all we know, Putin's not going to be president in X amount of time. And I'm thinking about shelf life. I'm thinking about how this with the dates as it was. So originally, and the books actually came out in sequence for the 2018 election. So I was leading up my 4th book, which has an election in it, was for the actual election real time. So it came out the month before, and the result was announced in my series. And that's the one that's just come out actually. And so obviously, as soon as you do that, you date it, you peg it to something. So it has I think the draw. So coming back to the pandemic is you put that in a real time event, and if the book's out in 15 years, it automatically dates it to 2020, and then so whereas holding loose some of these things and leaving them out so that the book could exist in a book written now could exist in 2030 and someone's reading it as if it's present day, that's fine. So again, I think the more I come across these moments, I think I'll go that route, just because I want to do this right. I want to set up for the long term, particularly with Conundrum sort of adding their expertise and to give them books that don't need constant updating every 5 years to sort of keep it relevant.
I did this. I did the same exact thing. So the very first book in my Jack Riley series, where Jack is still with Delta, he's in Mosul, Iraq, fighting the good fight, and it is an actual operation that did take place. It took place in 2016. And Jack was a part of it. And it's really the only time in the entire series that I have a specific date that isn't an historical event. And I did that on purpose because the book came out in 2020 and he had retired. So there was a 4-year gap from that mission in 2016 to the book's release. And I'm like, okay, but I'm also thinking, how old is Jack? How many years have passed? Like where? So now all of the missions that are happening past or post 2016, so in this case post 2020, when the first book takes place, there are no dates. So it's, are they 2 weeks after? Are they 3 weeks after? Are they 4 months later? So it's like Bond. James Bond has never aged a day in his life, right?
Amazing, isn't it? It looks good, doesn't it? Yeah.
So there's precedent. You don't have to age the character. You can just be very vague, but the reader expects that now. They're okay with it. You know, you don't have to age the character to the point to where they out age their ability, because that would be a very awful way to do it, in my opinion. Because then you're like,
well, no one wants to see James Bond with a Zimmer frame, you know, trying to chase down. Yeah.
They don't. You don't need James to be wheeling around an oxygen tank. You know, it's I completely understand. So like grounding it in certain places to where it doesn't really harm the story. Yeah, sure, no problem. Like I did that as an origin. And then boom, done. No more aging. And the only thing I'll ever age is an historical event that has already happened. So it's no big deal. So I mean, I don't want to cliche myself to death with you, but influences. So James Bond. I mean, what can I say? I'm like, there's certain things in certain cultures where it's kind of a given that there had to be some sort of like influence from that. I have that, and I'm
to some degree. I think to some degree. I think for me, I think what frustrates me with the whole James Bond thing is that kind of the unreality of it. So it's
entertaining, but it's not like.
Well, you know, like, well, for me, it's just this, you know, so I'm more like the Jason Bourne over, you know, so, but, you know, Jason, obviously he, you know, there will be fights that he won't enter because, you know, is that kind of balance, you know, the whole classic James Bond. I mean, I think the newer films are a lot more real, and with the classic, you know, 600 men chasing him, shooting, they all miss. He fires one bullet and it blows something up. And they, you know, it's just unrealistic. You know, it's this kind of, you know, particularly if they're meant to be like, you know, high trained militants or, you know. So I think and obviously as a writer that creates its own problem. If like on a really key book, well, you know, later on in the Hunt series, it also will come out with Conundrum, I think later this year. They're all out by February anyway. All 9 are out by Feb. So it is book 8. So maybe it comes out in January. But and it's called The Black Dolphin. So it's a real place, fascinating prison. It's the most high secure prison in Russia, and all the my editor kept like commenting like, oh, surely this doesn't happen. But you know, through research, you know, every practice I talk about is actually what they do. You know, the way prisoners are, you know, they're blindfolded and bent down with arms behind the back whenever they're moved around the prison, just so that no prisoner gets orientation of the prison. That, you know, it's never been an escape. It's like impossible to escape from. And really, in the book, there's a character, one of the beloved main characters. No spoilers, but I can say he. There's only 50-50 chance. So he's in this prison and kind of, you know, like shouldn't be there, and so it's like this. I have this quandary, you know, how prison's either like impossible to escape from or it isn't. You can't like, so you know, either they can rescue this guy and become the heroes, but then the prison's not as impenetrable as you make out, or they. So for me, that's, you know, so this was my James Bond moment. Like, well, you know, this isn't going to be one of those moments where everyone else has failed and they get it right. You know, so how do I create a genuine situation? And you know, the solution came to me. I actually needed to write a book before that, so this should have been book 7 in the series. It's the one that kind of most people want the answer for, but I made it book 8 because I created a solution in book 7, which then became the solution in book 8, which was wonderful.
That was actually very smart to do.
And it held, and for me then it keeps me true to how I want to write, is write realistic and believable, create genuine moments of absolute tension, which is, you know, I'm not one way or the other with the series. Obviously I'm an English writer, it's at my 5, but you know, they're not, you know, they don't succeed at everything they do. You know, there's setbacks. Obviously I'm not fully pro Russia in the sense of, you know, they can't do any wrong. You know, there's this, you know, but you create these conflict, these moments, these characters where because you've crafted it and you've led things that far, they're like genuine opposites, you know. And for the reader, I think it creates more surprise, more anticipation, because they don't quite know. And particularly those that have come on me with the journey, I'm not afraid to take out characters. So really, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee, and I think that just adds to it. I've watched, I think, all the James Bonds. I haven't read, so for me, my entry to James Bond was through movies.
Same.
And so, you know, I wouldn't not watch for the sake of, you know, that element. But I think I definitely appreciate when there's a bit more up for grabs, when you aren't quite sure, you know. And I think for me that adds, so that I try and write that. I try and so these are the kind of movies, the kind of things I'm into. And
yeah, what else can you kind of dive into? Like, I always tell people, mine are the very uber generic action adventure films, the Indiana Joneses, you know, The Mummy 1999, National Treasure, you know, Goonies, you know, and then the video games of Uncharted and Tomb Raider, like in the movies too, just because they're adventure romps. I don't know, I don't have to love perfect movies. I can love movies that need some work. But but that's where the influence comes from, is I can see it, and that's how I became a writer. Is I'm watching these movies going, God, I think I could do better, like being cheeky. And then my wife was like, well, then do it. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, write a book. And I'm like, okay. And then I literally started Googling, like, I don't know how to like physically write a book, like formatting and like I don't have an education in this. So it's like, I'm like, okay, let's get started. And then, you know, so it was kind of one of those things where it's like picking apart the movie as far as the fan kind of drove me to writing, because I'm like, well, I'm not in Hollywood, so I need a way to even step foot into this world where maybe I'll get taken seriously. And here we are. And that's where it came from, was, you know, there were just some hokey scenes in what could have been an amazing movie, and me going, wow, I would have done this, and this different, just from a fan's perspective. This is what I wish they would have done. And I said, to hell with it, I'm going to do it myself.
Well, I mean, and you're a lot closer to Hollywood than I am. I sometimes feel in the middle of nowhere. That's one of my drawbacks. Though, yeah, I have been in a Hollywood film, so
I have not.
It counts as a Hollywood film. So Tenet, you know Tenet, so Christopher Nolan, big budget. I love his film. Well, I love most of his films. So they filmed it in Tallinn. So I got to be an extra. And I actually appear on screen in the opening. Have you seen the film?
I've seen it once, so I'm not overly familiar.
Opening scene when they terrorists take over the concert hall, and all the audience are put to sleep. So I'm there. I'm on screen about 5 minutes, 23 in or something, sleeping. So amazing.
So you got to show off your acting chops, you know.
Absolutely. I mean,
how well can you lay still?
Exactly. I was born for it. But so in terms of influences, I think definitely thrillers with a like. So I would say my writing style is like is deep thrillers. So I like write, you know, things that have a lot of depth. So you can. I tried it. So I tried my very first book called Cherry Picking, my debut novel. And I was trying to do a book version of like The Sixth Sense. Okay. So in not that storyline, but in the sense of that's a movie that the first time you watch it, and then you hit the you know, I won't do it, no spoilers, but most people have probably seen it, but you hit that moment where like you get it, right? Yeah. And then of course when you watch it again, it's a totally different film, because you then see it's all there and you never realized it. So I kind of wanted, you know, I tried that with Cherry Picking. And for those that stuck with it, they loved it. They loved the twist. So I think that kind of, a lot of my most loyal fans came to me through that first book. And it was, you know, back in the day, I wasn't on the golden wave of like early Amazon Kindle adopters, but I was, you know, early enough that the promotion still worked. And it got a lot of like downloads and things like that, and did well. And so a lot of readers came to me through that. It was at the time a terrible cover. Yeah, you know, wasn't fully edited to the standard or anywhere near the standard it should have been, or what I do now. But people loved the story, apart from those that switched off early. So it was like, you know, I I'm a big sports fan, and I think of some of the great games, whatever sport you play. There's always these iconic matches that at halftime it looked completely down, and then something changed. And if you spoke to someone who left at half time, they would just say it's a terrible match. And if you spoke to someone at full time, they would have a completely different view because they'd stuck it out. And I think so. All the negative reviews for that first book were, and they even said it. I gave up after 30%. And because I hadn't got to the point. And so obviously all my later books I started a lot earlier. And actually, this book in question is going to be published with Conundrum in April next year. So when I hit January, I'm going to have to go into it for the first time in a long time. Obviously, it's the first book I've written. I've written 23 since,
nice.
And a screenplay. Again, we can touch on that in a moment. I've started writing screenplays, which is also good. So what will be really interesting for me in January is going back into this book is, well, like, what do I do with it? Because, like, So do I move that key moment, which happens in chapter 16, so probably about that 40% mark? Do I move that forward? But then, kind of like The Sixth Sense, if we have that scene where he realizes it right early on, well, is it a different movie? It kind of is. But I'm deliberately not going to look at it till January. I'm just writing new stuff at the moment, but it's going to be an interesting thing of what I do with it. I don't think I'll change it hugely. I'll just bring this writing up to standard and what I do and cut it back a bit. It's the longest book.
It's funny you say that, because the one thing that I was taught early on, I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and the one thing that I was taught early on from some of my early author friends and mentors, the King Gilmores of the world, Sean Ellis, Jeremy Robinson, Kent Holloway, like some of these guys. I did beta reading for Jeremy Robinson for like 2 years before I started writing. So, and I would always bounce ideas off of him. And especially when I was first starting these guys, these relationships, they were very willing to look at my early work and even just the beginnings, just to see what I was trying to do. And the one thing I was taught very early on, and the one thing that what I believe is very good at, is the hook. So the one thing that all the James Bond movies, for instance, all of the action adventure movies that I watch have, is the opening scene leans you in deeper. Because I mean, that's what James is built on, right? They have that massive opening number, and then the song comes in, and then the movie starts. And it's like that big opening number is kind of like their MO, that's like what they do. And that's what I do, is that opening number for me is what's going to keep the reader there until whatever is developed. And that is the one thing that I can give. If anyone's looking for advice that's watching this, is that opening number needs to be Bond-esque, needs to be Indiana Jones-esque, or modern Uncharted-esque, where you're watching it going, holy crap. It may not even have anything to do with the actual story, but it's the introduction of the character and the introduction of the theme of the book. Is it fast paced? Is it action packed? I mean, that's what I write. So people that write a little bit more of those slow burn, or maybe even more horror, maybe it's disgusting, maybe it's horrifying, maybe it's like, oh my God, this is awful. But people that read that genre want that. So they're going to be like, perfect. This is awesome. I don't read that, so I don't want that. So it's like, that's that hook at the beginning, no matter what it is so important. And I put a lot of effort into that hook, because I know it's like, if you start kind of flat with just these introductions, readers might think that's the way it's going to be to the last page. And it can be the greatest book in the world, but if it doesn't, like,
of course, which is So I mean,
and it happens. It's common.
I mean, what I just remembering, what I think I'll do for this book in question is I'll probably actually just add like a new little section in that, like a sort of almost. I mean, it'll be chapter 1. I won't call it the prologue, because people often read over that and don't even jump to chapter 1. I hear, apparently, so just make it chapter 1. But probably talking about like placing, talking about this character. He might never, like I think I'm going to do something new, but that just really builds up and basically, in not using those words, says, there's a lot to come. Wait till you see the reveal. So
no, that's
Yeah. So,
Whether it's like this drastic theft of a weapon that is going to come back in, but at least it's kind of like that little sneak peek on what to come,
yeah.
10,
No,
15,
it's
20 chapters later.
yeah. So
You
it's
know?
So I mean, it's lots of influences. I think, for example, like when Lost came out. I mean, I'm the age that watched it. Video. I had to get it video because I think it switched to a cable channel, maybe season 3 or something. So I watched it with our friends. I thought that was fascinating. I thought like maybe they botched the season 6 a little bit and think, but things like that, things that just that multi-level, that's my kind of, that's like my street.
A little bit more psychological thriller, a little bit more,
Yeah, and a wide cast. I think I like a wide cast. Generally, I always write third person, so I've never done, certainly in the series, I don't do like first person kind of.
I have one series that's first person present, and I've gotten more compliments on that character than any other character I've ever written. So
I'm not saying it's not to do. Absolutely,
it's fun. It's just very, very different. It's very fun. Because you can do just about anything writing first person present, because the whole idea is that the reader, and in this case the author, only knows as much as the character does.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the narrator telling everybody what's happening.
No,
if the character can't see it or he doesn't know it.
Which is why
it doesn't happen.
For me, I would have to. I think the idea, obviously, my ideas are always, my stories are always idea driven. So once I get the kind of it's usually the question. I usually say. So I wrote a dystopian at the end of the first month of lockdown. Up to that point, I always write. I write at home. My family, they're at school, so I have the house to myself. And I always thought I only write in silence. I only write. I don't have music on. I just need to be here. And this first month of lockdown, my wife's a teacher, so she's in one room doing online for her whole class. My 2 daughters are doing online. The whole house is chaos. I wrote this book in 10 days, and it was like a runaway success, like a dystopian thriller called The 26th Protocol. And really the premise, and it's the hook on the back, it's like, what if life had a use by date? So it's this idea that it's a future society where, because of advances in medicine and genetics and understanding of that, from birth it's possible to know how long everybody will live and when they're going to decline. And it's a society built around like enjoying that last year before decline, and then voluntary euthanasia. So like they want to sanitize death. They want to control it. They don't want the cost of old age. And it's this whole system of, and you see it in school. So that they're dated. It's printed on their head and their forehead. Every baby from birth, once they've DNA's checked, they know the date that they go in. They enter this jubilee year, this abundant year where they get all this resource, and basically the money that the state isn't paying to fund old age is given to the healthy in their last year. And it's this whole so it's a whole system.
Yeah. Interesting.
A very different book, but like kind of works on lots of different levels. So fits my criteria, but really came out from this idea: what if life had a use by date?
Wow.
And it's it was a. So I took my thriller brain and kind of wrote this dystopian thriller. So for some of the only negative, it ends too quickly, because for me, I try and land a book at 80,000 words, and it's the thriller kind of feel. So possibly a pure, I don't know, dystopian writer might have
any just curious, just because any influence from Logan's Run.
So people kept in the
not
comments,
in a bad way. It's just it's an interesting concept, and Logan's Run is.
I've never seen it, and funny you mention it. I only heard about that because I kept getting these constant comments on the. So it's the one book I ran loads of. People say, "Oh, so not Logan's Run then?" And I looked up the the description, and it's I haven't watched it, so but reading up the IMDb and all that about
it, Michael Caine, I think, right?
Very different. Feels very different.
I think it was Michael.
Yeah, Caine. Very different idea, because I think wasn't there something about they hit a certain age, or they're all, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think they're all 30.
Yeah, so I
I
guess so
think
that's a
it's
bit like
something. Yeah, yeah,
in time they're all 25 as well. Hey, so people are different ages. So some, some
yeah.
their jubilee year doesn't start till 85. Particularly if
Sure,
they're
sure.
wealthy. Some, they only get given 50 years or something. So it's all based on no. So, but it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. People have made a comparison. I think what a lot of people were starting to do was like compare it to like a modern day Handmaid's Tale, modern day 1984, in
Gotcha.
terms of the feel it does. So, though having again recently, I read 1984 for the first time, and really it's like you know, I wasn't so impressed with the ending just because I thought, well, if as an author. I just want to create a really bad world. Well, I could do that. I think it's kind of cleverer to kind of bring some sort of solution, some sort of hope. I get what
Sure.
Orwell
Yeah.
was trying to do and trying to show you the dangers of communism and all that. But it was it just paints a very bleak picture. It doesn't give doesn't give you much at the end.
That is probably a pleasant way of putting it for 1984.
Yeah.
That is like horrific in that sense. That's like when I was younger. I didn't read very much at all when I was younger.
Mhm.
Mostly because I was reading the wrong things. So it was like attention wise, there was just nothing that I found when I was a kid, between grade school and high school, um,
Mhm.
that I was overly like interested in. But there were a few of them, and one of them was this American literature, Where the Red Fern Grows,
Mhm.
and it's like a southern kind of like plantation family type of thing, but it revolved around a kid and his two coon dogs, Big Dan and Little Ann.
Mhm.
And I'm a little boy who loves dogs, so
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, this might be fun to read. And the dogs get slaughtered by a mountain lion near the end. And but the meaning behind the story was very deep and very rich and very
Mhm.
like heartwarming. But I'm like, one dog gets its intestines ripped out by a mountain lion, the other dog dies of loneliness. And I'm like, I freaking hate this book. I'm
Yeah.
like, why did I read this? You know? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not reading any literature anymore because this is like heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I actually stumbled upon the Meg series from Steve Alton when I was a junior in high school, and it's New York Times bestseller. There's a movie. There's a second movie coming out. First time I had ever heard of a Catrodon megalodon,
Mm.
massive, great white shark, and I'm like,
Mm.
this might be fun. This might be cool. And then lo and behold, I start reading more, and then stumble upon my favorite authors, which are the Matthew Rileys of the world. And Jeremy Robinson has always been a big influence, and I read his stuff before like I said, before I became a writer. And James Rollins with the Sigma Force stuff, even into some of the young adult stuff with Rick Riordan. It's funny how once you figure out the genre that you belong in as a reader,
Mm.
um, you really start to see the world, and you start to see like the options. And then
Mm.
um, translates into a writer once you realize the genre you belong in or the genre that you're comfortable in.
Mm.
You also realize those possibilities. And like I've
Yeah.
strayed, and I've done like the first person series that I do is a apocalyptic monster book, and but it's very different than because I wanted it to be different. I didn't want it to be your typical, oh, zombie apocalypse. There's 900,000 of those available right now, because that was like Walking Dead at its peak is when I started writing this stuff.
Mhm.
And it's character driven. All my
Mhm.
stories, if the character isn't a big part of the story and it revolves around something else, I have no interest in it.
Mhm.
That's just excuse me, my style. But
Mhm.
uh, so we know the influences, and it's actually really interesting to hear. I'm actually really, really, I guess you would say both impressed and just kind of like, huh, kind of interested. And but what I also really like to find out is, especially the reader. I know they like this. So as the movie fanatic growing up, the one thing that I was in love with was watching the behind the scenes making of those movies. Like for me, I could watch the making of the first Indiana Jones, the three movies, over and over again.
Mhm.
The making parts, and seeing Harrison backstage putting the hat on or getting fit for his jacket, and
Mhm.
seeing
Mhm.
Steven and George behind the lens talking. And it's like, to me, that was cool. That was amazing. I loved it. And that's the whole point of this podcast. But I also like to know the process of it. So in this case, writing the book. Um,
Mhm.
when you come up with a story, or maybe the tiniest idea of a story, like I'm very visual. So I see something, I see a fjord, I automatically want to write about something in Norway. I
Mhm.
see, a monastery, I automatically want to write about something maybe in Nepal or Tibet. And
Mhm.
there's like, so I'm like, well, what can I drop in that location? So for me, location usually drives the possibility of the story, because then I'll start Googling like mythology and lore on that specific area. And then maybe I'll stumble upon something going, I could see Jack getting into a whole bunch of trouble looking for something in this area. So here we are. I don't know what it looks like for you. And just like, so when you see something, is it like, maybe, maybe not this, oh, the character, this, like, what is it kind of, what is the process going through your head?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it does. It's in the early days. It was like kind of. I mean, so for my debut novel, I think the first few, it was so Stephen King on his book on writing like describes it as this. I think it's the ship coming through a fog. You suddenly see this whole, and actually it kind of this for the first book, having written before but never finished anything. I had the title, the premise, the beginning, the end. It just all was there, dropped in, and that for the first few that sort of was there, and yeah, it varies often. Early mornings you wake up, get an idea in the night, and it's pretty much there. So it's a combo between that kind of that what if question. So for the 26th protocol I mentioned earlier, that dystopia. Well, what if life had a use by day? And out of a little phrase like that, I can, and it's like it's a thing that just hooks on, and then suddenly thoughts come around it, and you just a world develops. I had my birthday last week, and out at a restaurant with my family, and then like just sort of used the restroom, and just and as I was thinking there, coming out, I thought, well, what if I came out and they weren't here, and then actually they're nowhere in the city, and actually they've the house we live in was so I actually had this idea that just came out of a real life situation of like, again, the thought was there like, well, what would I do? And then so I told them the whole idea, and they're like, you've got to write that one next. You've got to write that one. So we'll see. It wasn't in my plan to write it next. I will. So what I would do, because it comes onto your question as well. So when I get an idea like that, I have an iPad full of lots of ideas.
Sure.
So I do let them percolate for a bit. Let the ones that ones that resonate will come to the top, and then we'll definitely plan. So I know some authors. So I originally, before my debut one, I would start a story. So I guess describe it as a pantser, isn't it? Yeah. So writing by the seat of a pants, just seeing how it goes. And for me, that approach stopped me becoming a writer, because I it's like setting off on a fun car journey. I was lots of fun, but I got really lost. No clue.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then when I with that that first idea dropping in for that debut novel, and everything since, as soon as I had to start finish, it's like you have a route map. And yes, you have to flesh it out, but suddenly you've got these like it's like plodding a journey across America, and now well, these are the main ports of call. Yes, there's going to be the writing process will develop those little journeys, but like the ultimate destination, what has to happen. And so really that's been my approach since. So I plan. It's not a like a 30,000 word thing or anything. I will look at each scene, and in a couple of sentences, 2-3 sentences, so 20 to 50 words, probably for about 40 scenes ish. If I get 35, that's fine, because then there's always a bit of wiggle room. I will map out using Scrivener, so on my Mac. I will map out on the corkboard, and just give myself these 40 scenes, knowing that each scene's about 2,000 words. I work to the 80,000 word target, so it's there and thereabouts. And I know that's enough time to sort of land a novel. So we'll map it out from that. Also, planning will involve character names, usually randomly generated, an outline, so that when I come to that first day of writing, I do it in sequences. So I don't write little every day. I'm either planning or I'm writing. And when I write, I'll write through the whole day. So today was a writing day. I've topped 9,000 words.
Oh, nice.
And so I will do that, and then have my paper when I'm writing. And writing's just about the writing. So don't read it through, don't edit it. It's obviously full of mistakes. I try and write fast. Generally, I try and do in 10 days, get the thing down. And I think, and the latest development, so the book I'm writing today is actually the book version of my first screenplay. So that's, again, it's another take, and I think it's an approach I really like, because like you, I'm a visual thinker, and I've wanted to write a screenplay for a while. I want to write movies. I want my books to become movies. So ultimately, I want to adjust screenplays from the books I've already written. But the screenplay I wrote was for a brand new idea, just because I thought, let's give myself the best opportunity to learn it before I'm trying to write the book. And then I thought, well, having written a screenplay, let's write the book version of that, and then use the process of having written the book to then go back and sharpen the screenplay. And I quite like that approach, because obviously the screenplay, it's a different approach. You have to write a lot less detail, but you have all the dialogue. And often, if I'm writing book, well, the dialogue can be the thing. So actually, if I've already got the dialogue written in the screenplay, it's quite good to then flip between the two. So when I finish this book, it's looking like it's going to be less. I mean, I think I'm way over halfway through, and I'm at 37,000 words after 5 days. So I'm guessing it's going to land around the 60 mark, which is not surprising, because I'm basing it quite a bit on the screenplay, which is only 120 pages and minimal.
So you're extending something that you didn't intend to extend.
Yeah, so we'll see. But I mean,
I can see that being a little bit of
we'll see how it goes. I mean, it might be a bit, it might be a bit longer than that by the time I finish it. But
I mean, as much as readers want long and they want like bulk, they don't want fat. So it's like they want the meat, they want the muscle. They if it's 70,000 words and it's great, or if it's 90,000 words and it has 20,000 words of fat, it's like, okay, the 90,000 word book has more maybe detail or more substance, but was it a better book because it was longer?
Does it add to it? Exactly.
Not at
we'll
all.
see. We'll see. I mean, before it even it becomes published, it'll go through the street team and all that, and so I will have those feelers out long before then. But going forward, I do wonder if for all my new ideas, where I try and do that double act. So screenplay, straight to the novel, back to the screenplay, knowing that at each stage it's sharpening, strengthening the other version. And then in theory, I go through a writing phase. That might be a month's worth of writing. If, say, I get the screenplay done in 10 days, the book in another 10, and then 10 days of redoing it. So then I come out of that phase, that month, that process, with 2 versions of the same work. Both, obviously the book version will go down the publishing route, and actually the screenplay, it feels like it's easy to get in front of the key people, because there's all these contests and stuff you can enter where actual movie directors of movies that I like and watch, they're on the judging panel, and you just you can get feedback. And so the feedback I got for this one screenplay was fantastic. So I just need to so part of this process is that I'm going to implement the feedback they gave me to improve it, and then resubmit it and just see what happens. But we'll see. But I write standing up. So I shifted to a standing desk about 6 years ago, in a moment of madness, maybe. It was a personal kind of family crisis at the time. My wife, was just started chemotherapy, and to pass the time, I decided to convert my desk. Shifted to it, and so I'm on my feet. But I think that it's definitely not slowed me down. I've improved, sped up, and obviously it's healthier for me. But it's there's something about being on your feet. If you're on your feet, you don't want to waste time.
Sure.
So,
I can see its advantages, because you're probably less likely to be comfortable, so you're less likely to be lax.
Yeah.
You're going to be probably more active in what you're doing because you're just
Yeah.
naturally more active when you're doing on your feet.
For like
Uh,
now, for example, there's moments. So if I'm like thinking dialogue, I'll often just move around and actually almost have that conversation, or just thinking it through, like
Gotcha.
moving, and through that movement, you just sort of, you're in the situation, you're taking in what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and
Yeah,
then
I do that a lot with that. I'll spin around in my chair and just stare at it.
yeah. I used to have a map. Yeah, before
Yeah,
we got this family portrait, I used to have
yeah,
a map on the wall. Yeah. It's
yeah.
great. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted something that fit the decor. Like this entire room, color-wise, is all that, terracotta, earthy,
Mhm.
Indiana Jones brown, graham cracker, whatever you want to call it. So everything's kind of that coloration, and it's just kind of, it's the world, I guess. It's the world I'm in, anyways. It's what
Mm.
it's just that comforting uh, type of.
It's a great reference point. I mean, yeah, when the map was on the wall, I used to have my desk facing the window, so like it was literally just on my left, and like just for that quick reference point of like if you're looking at a
Yeah.
particular city or a country and you need to pick out a city, I just use Google Maps for that now, but like
Yeah,
still,
I do too. But for me, it's more like visual. So like I'll sit there and go, well, my guys are here, but I want them to go there. And then
yeah,
I'll literally just look at it and go, well, they probably have to stop there. So I'll literally just see the countries in between. Then I'll get on my computer and just kind
yeah,
of start. But it's more of like that quick glance. So
yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
lose, mostly so I don't lose my train of thought. If I'm on the computer and I'm like, there's a million windows open and I'm bound to like lose one of those tiny little aspects of the idea. But so what can you tell us about your life outside of writing? Now, we talked off camera where I have no life outside of writing, but it's on purpose. It's on purpose. I just enjoy it. Like I love doing the podcast now, writing full time. I'm editing with Conundrum. I'm helping run that publication. I also do a lot of graphic design and book covers and stuff. So everything that isn't writing is still in the world of writing. It just doesn't happen to be writing books.
Hmm.
So, and I have two daughters, my wife, dog, cat. Like we have a lot to keep us busy. So
Hmm.
there's plenty of stuff for me outside of this world that isn't necessarily hobby-ish. It's more just like life. So I don't know if you're in the same boat as I am, where it's like you just enjoy life outside of work and that's kind of it. Or is there more going on behind the scenes that kind of like helps, I guess, get your mind off of work occasionally?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so I have the office, spare room at home, and we have two cats, but the door stays closed. So, and partly because it's a guest room, so that if guests ever to come, there's that space. But generally, it's just me here, and made a choice just to keep it a work zone. So I
Sure.
mean, it does mean when I shut the door, go out the rest of the apartment, I'm home, and they know not to disturb me in here. And yeah, we two cats are a year old, so that's been a great lot of fun this last year. They're both, yeah, two daughters. So I'm at the stage where my oldest turned 17 this week, and my youngest is 12 and a half. So getting to the point where they're more independent anyway.
Yep.
And being in Estonia has been amazing. So children are very, very independent here. So like normal school starts on the 1st of September in this part of the world. It's one thing we learnt in Russia. It's a big, it's study day. It's always, everything starts on the 1st, even if it's a Sunday. That's really so.
Interesting.
Our
Yeah, we
daughter starts
started August 10th, I think.
yeah, but it's always 1st of September in the normal state schools,
Sure.
and so in Estonia, so you'll get kids who are they start school at 7 here, so before that it's kindergarten, but they'll be expected to get themselves to and from school on buses, then pretty
Interesting.
much straight away. So I think we being foreign, I think we for the first year we would often take our oldest when she was starting here, but you see it. They're a lot more responsible when they're a bit older. So now they're at this age, in that sense, we're not having to run around and stuff. They're doing their own thing. So trying to get time as a family is the thing we try and do outside. Becoming increasingly more challenging. I do try and play some sports. So I play at the school that my wife works at, and with the staff on a Friday, so that's looking forward to that starting up this week as well. Volleyball if I can. Just today I applied to join this group that they play volleyball regularly, just because I think the challenge is being this far north is, winters are long and dark and cold and snowy, and it's hard to do any like stuff outside. So with winter in mind, it's thinking, okay, what gets me active? I do I enjoy team sports and things like that. I obviously enjoy reading, and we watch a lot of movies. We have a subscription service, so we often watch, definitely on a Friday night, Saturday night, watch movies, read John Grisham. So John Grisham's my go-to author now. So I grew up with Jack Higgins, but John Grisham is, I guess, an author I would aspire to be like. So I don't write legal thrillers, but I like his books and like his style. And if I can be half as good, I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's me with like Matthew Riley and those types of guys. James Rollins is probably like, I mean, Matthew Riley's huge. I mean, he just directed and wrote his first movie. It's called Interceptor. It stars what Elsa Pataki. It's Chris Hemsworth's wife. So and she's a great actress, and so that would be an amazing writer to aspire to. Don't get me wrong. And James Rollins, with him basically being the #1 action thriller author in the world when it comes to overall book sales and whatever rankings you want to use. But very good, very good. Yeah, I used to play a lot of softball. I had buddies that we would get together and play, and then just as the body got balkier and balkier over the years, I would always find myself hurting and doing something and going, this isn't fun anymore. I'm always hurt. And then I'm like, now I don't want to do anything when I get home. My kids want to play and my back's killing me. And I'm kind of like, I need to take it easy a little bit. I'm not there yet. I'm 38. So, but the body is not what it used to be. And, but various injuries too. It's not just any age related. It's beating myself up over the years, and it's catching up with me finally.
But, it happens to us all.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. And I'm taller and skinny, so the joints and like the spine don't have a lot of help from excess muscle. So I probably just racked my body to where now I'm not as flexible and I don't bounce as well as I used to. So now when I do something, my body's like, no, no, stop. Where before I'd be like, in a day or two I'd be fine. Now it's like a week or two and I'm fine. But so to kind of more or less finish up, I mean, it's time has flown. We've been here for over an hour. I've been having a great talk with you, Tim. I really do appreciate you coming on. The one thing I want to end with is for the viewers, for the listeners, if there is a book out there that's of yours that would be like, this is a Tim Heath book, you guys need to check it out if you haven't read my stuff yet, where would you point them towards?
Yeah, so I would start, point them to the first book in the Hunt series, The Prey. It's obviously, each book is like a standalone, so it's clearly linked in the series, and events go on, and to get a real feel for the world I've lived in, this part of the world, and the way I write, and it's a real taster for the other material that will be coming out with Conundrum very soon as well. So I would say that it's a great start. Cool. It's obviously it's been redone, so it's up there with my latest standard of writing and the expertise of Conundrum. So it's a cool series. And I would love to hear from readers. I have a reader map, so readers have been all around the world, and so if you read one of my books, let me know, and I'll put a in the town where you are, and you can see yourself on the map. So and that's been really fun to I think Hawaii, all over, lots of the states, not every state yet, so there's still lots of states missing, so do let me know. But I think I would say The Prey for my books, but really any book you can pick up and enjoy, that's the aim.
Cool. And what about something that isn't yours? So whether it's a John Grisham novel, whether it's another novel in more of your genre, you know, I always tell people pick up Pulse from Jeremy Robinson. It's the first book in his Jack Sigler series, which was a big influence on me. Pick up the Seven Ancient Wonders or Seven Deadly Wonders, depending on what country you're in. It changed titles by Matthew Riley, the first book in the Jack West Jr. series. Both authors and series were massive, massive influences for me. I always drive people towards those. And once they read them, they'll go, oh, I see where Matt's coming from. But what about you?
Yeah. For me, yes, I guess I'll pick one off each from the two authors I mentioned earlier. So Jack Higgins, this Irish writer, you sort of, The Eagle Has Landed. That is a movie. That was I think my favorite one of him. This kind of Second World War plot to assassinate the British Prime Minister by the Nazis landing in the UK. He says based around real life events, but I still wonder if that was literally him being the author in the opening chapter, not himself. So adding to the story. And for John Grisham, the Runaway Jury is still my favorite book of his. And again, it is a movie, but they changed it slightly in terms of, I think instead of cigarettes, it was guns or something. But it was one of these big issues in America, and very fun book. And I really enjoyed it. And for me, that was my go-to one. So when I got my first 1-star review, it took me on a journey, and I looked at the Runaway Jury, and looked at the 1-star reviews for that, and it just showed me that people really don't know what they read. It's like, you can't read a lot into a review because I know that book was great, and I looked at the 1-star reviews, and it would imply that it was like his worst ever. And you think, well, sometimes reviews can be maybe there's some different agenda going on.
I've done that before, where I used to look at all the reviews, because when I was young, in writing, so when I was a younger writer, I really wanted and truthfully wanted to know what people thought of my work, because that would help me grow. I wanted to see if there was a commonality to a problem I had. So is it, the character was unbelievable, or it was too hokey, or the action was so over the top, it was unbelievable. So maybe I need to rein in certain things. It's kind of like when you're adjusting the EQ in music, and you have the bass high, the treble high, the mids low, and you're doing this, you're I want to try to equalize everything. And then as time went by and the glowing reviews came in, and all the glowing reviews complimented everything that I thought I was already doing, I just stopped looking at anything. Honestly, I stopped looking at anything was any kind of negative review, because it's kind of like a movie rating system, right? You don't know what their baseline is. So it's what is their baseline? Is their baseline 3 is good, 4 is better, 5 is great? Or is it 4 is good, 5 is you don't know. And you're and like you said, the hidden agenda. Maybe they just don't like action adventure novels. I'm well, then why did you buy my book? It's I'm very, very clear on what style of book this is when I publish. But same thing. It's for a while I cared. Now I'm ecstatic, and I'm very happy that I see the amount of reviews that do come in nowadays. But
well done.
I mean, it's more of, they do matter, and they do matter when it comes to algorithms and coding on Amazon side. So please send in your reviews. But at the same time, it's I don't rely on them as far as confidence.
No. You definitely get.
My Frank Moon character.
I need to see reviews regardless, and because I know I'm a numbers person, so when that magic number changes, and partly because I don't know, people just aren't reviewing as much as they used to do, and generally the negative people review almost every time, and the positive reviewers are doing it a lot less.
No, I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah, and the Frank Moon character I wrote in my Dead Moon series, which Conundrum we are republishing in November. More news on that as time goes. But he is a detective with the NYPD. He's been a cop his whole life, and he is just numb to violence. And so his humor is very dark and very just relatable, I guess, in that he just doesn't react as awful to certain situations anymore. And I had a
Mhm.
5-star review for one of the books, and it was a retired police officer's wife. And she goes, "You nailed my husband to a T. He has the most sadistic, dense sense of humor because of
Yeah.
all the terrible stuff he saw as a
Mhm.
cop." And she goes, "The story was amazing, but you nailed like the awful sense of humor that Frank has, and in the
Mm.
best way possible." Because and I was like, "Oh, thank you." It's just like, that was just, I guess, confirmation bias at this point. But so I mean, we do read them, and or at least we do digest them.
Mhm.
But on that, I want to remind the viewers and the listeners, please subscribe to the channel. More subscriptions equals more shows, more likes. Share this all over social media, specifically Facebook and Instagram. We're on when it comes to real life fiction. Conundrum Publishing as well, conundrumpub.com. Um, Tim, where can we find you online as far as if readers have a question or just to look up more stuff on you besides the typical Amazon page?
Yeah, so timheathbooks.com is my website. And I think either Tim Heath Books or Tim Heath Author is on all social media channels. So I think generally Tim Heath Author, so you'll find me Instagram or Facebook under that. I think Twitter I don't use as much. That's Tim Heath Books. But yeah,
I'm on Twitter as
there is
well.
another Tim Heath who writes about Hitler and Nazis. So I'm not that author. So yeah, but so Tim
There
Heath,
is a English
Tim Heath,
author.
yeah,
Yeah, there's an English
books.com.
author named Matt James who is a horticulturist. So he writes about botany and plants. So not me. And there's also Matt James who happens to be a bachelor from the TV show. Also very much not me.
Yeah. Or and here in Tallinn, living there is another Tim Heath who is an Australian millionaire, and honestly, been like I had I won't name them. I had a global parcel delivery service writing to me to because Tim Heath had ordered a case of gin or something from the UK, and had to do custom. It's like, this isn't. It's like I think they delivered books to me in the past, and they must have just saw my name and thought, oh, it's the same person.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
interesting.
it's funny. So of all, because it's obviously not an Estonian name, we live in Estonia, so it's unusual to have two of us in one place. So I've never met him, but I have lots of friends in common who know us both, which is really funny.
That's funny. That is funny. Wow. So, Tim, thank you again for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Check out his Hunt series, publishing through Conundrum Publishing. You said the rest of the books will be coming out past the first of the year. You said
Very soon, yeah.
January, February, all that. And look for his other releases and his new stuff coming out soon as well. So thank you everyone for watching. Have a good one. And again, I can't thank you enough. And please, please, please subscribe. Thank you.